Hey guys, I hope everyone's doing well, and I'm sure you're aware that we had a presidential debate last night, or I guess when this video is posted it'll be 2 nights ago. But anyway, I'm recording this video on Wednesday, the day after the debate. So for me, it was just last night. And I wanted to give you guys a couple of my reactions. Now, I'm not gonna watch the whole debate and I'm not gonna respond to the entire debate. It's over an hour and a half long and that would be a long, boring video. But I am going to kind of take a look at some of the most important moments in the debate and give you my feedback. I was pretty irritated. I think that debates, number one, are not very helpful to the American people. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the topics themselves have nothing to do with anything. But on top of that, it was just a pretty infuriating debate just because of the personalities involved and the way that it just sort of turned out. So I think it's really important that we change the conversation, that we change what Americans are talking about on a daily basis when it comes to politics and when it comes to how we critique or look at our president or our potential president-elect. Unfortunately, Americans are so focused on feelings and emotions that that's all we look at. Okay, so that being said, I am going to watch some of this video with y'all and give you my reactions, and we'll see what you think about it.
I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way, In fact, some of her biggest endorsers are very liberal people from Notre Dame and other places. So I think she's going to be fantastic. We have plenty of time, even if we did it after the election itself. I have a lot of time after the election, as you know. So I think that she will be outstanding. She's going to be as good as anybody that has served on that court. We really feel that. We have a professor at Notre Dame, highly respected by all, said she's the single greatest student he's ever had. He's been a professor for a long time at a great school. And we won the election. And
okay, so I want to just say something about that. I'm marking down all of this for myself. Okay, so if you notice there, President Trump said that we were elected. Elections have consequences. And that's a very good argument, actually. The point he's making there is very valid. There's little anyone can say in response to that. If he would have focused on the fact that the Constitution gives him the power, no matter what, to do whatever he wants to do as president, given his presidential powers. And what I mean by that is he can do whatever a president is allowed to do for the duration of his entire presidency. It's completely unconstitutional to say that he couldn't. So instead of just sort of using precedent or the way it's always been to support his argument, it would have been more helpful if he would have referenced the Constitution, something that is higher than him, something that actually keeps him and holds him accountable. But instead, he just sort of talked about the fact that elections have consequences, which is a valid argument, and I think is probably one of his strongest arguments in the whole entire debate. So let's keep watching.
Well, thank you for doing this, and looking forward to this, Mr. President.
Thank you, Joe.
The American people have a right to have a say in who the Supreme Court nominee is. And that say occurs when they vote for a United States senators and when they vote for the President of the United States. They're not going to get that chance now because we're in the middle of an election already.
Okay, so I just have to say, of course they have a say. They're the ones who voted for President Trump and for the Senate that's in the office right now. So that's a very invalid argument.
Already started. Tens of thousands of people have already voted. And so the thing that should happen is we should wait. We should wait and see what the outcome of this election is, because that's the only way the American people get to express their view is by who they elect as president and who they elect as vice president. Now, what's at stake here is the president's made it clear he wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. He's been running.
Okay, let me just say, elections do have consequences, but none of that really matters. The fact that we're in an election year, that elections have already started, any of that is pretty irrelevant from what the Constitution actually says. Need I remind any of my viewers that John Adams actually appointed judges and justices of the peace, it was around 70-some, the day before he left office. Okay, and the Senate confirmed them all on the same day. This is what led to Marbury versus Madison, one of the most crucial and sort of game-changing Supreme Court cases in American history. But the Supreme Court case had nothing to do with the fact that the president had used his abilities to appoint judges and justices the last day he held office. So the fact that it's an election year, the fact that that's a invalid argument, Republicans should never have used it 4 years ago. Democrats shouldn't use it now. It undermines the power of the presidency. It undermines the election of the presidency as well as the Senate. And it's essentially just an invalid argument. The Constitution is all that matters. That's pretty much it.
On that, he ran on that, and he's been governing on that. He's in the Supreme Court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which will strip 20 million people from having insurance, health insurance now, if it goes into court, and the justice. And I have nothing. I'm not opposed to the justice. She seems like a very fine person, but she's written before she went on the bench, which is her right, that she thinks that the Affordable Care Act is not constitutional. The other thing is on the court, and if it's struck down, what happens? Women's rights are fundamentally changed. Once again, a woman could be pay more money because she has a pre-existing condition of pregnancy. They were able to charge a woman more for the same exact.
So Justice Amy Coney Barrett apparently, or I guess she's not a justice yet, Amy Coney Barrett has apparently written that she thinks the Affordable Care Act is not constitutional. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. This is what Joe Biden said. But I think that is the only time in the entire debate that the word constitution or constitutional is used. Big problem. And actually, she's correct, because the Constitution is pretty clear in the enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8. And there is nowhere in there, in those enumerated powers, that Congress is given the right or the power to make law that has to do with healthcare. It just isn't there. That's left to the states. So her argument is completely valid. In fact, this is something Trump should have talked about, or Biden for that matter, since really a person's political preference or political, affiliation shouldn't affect whether or not the Constitution has power. So notice here what they're doing. They are pulling on the emotional heartstrings of the American public. They're assuming that you're incredibly incompetent, incredibly uninformed, and incredibly incapable of keeping your own country safe and upholding the Constitution, okay? So notice, both of them are talking about healthcare. They're talking about pre-existing conditions. They're talking about insurance. They're talking about the Affordable Care Act in general. And then Biden sort of jumps to this whole coronavirus thing. He says 200,000 Americans have died on your watch. Okay, so the first thing I have to say about that is that none of those things have anything to do with the role of the president, okay? The president's job is not to solve disease. The president's job is not to solve sickness. That has nothing to do with his presidential duties. If we're going to assess somebody on their job description and on their ability to do their job description, we need to look at what their actual job description requires, right? And unfortunately, most Americans don't do that with the president. We expect far more of the president than he's ever been given constitutionally. So the president exists to execute law. That's it. He also has some powers to deal with foreign affairs, some treaty-making powers, along with the Senate. He can, send ambassadors, and that's also something that's done with the Senate. These are very few topics that the president has power over. That's it. So when Biden says that 200,000 Americans have died on your watch, meaning Trump, or on Trump's watch, and Trump fires back that Biden, this is later on in the video, but that under Biden's watch, it would be 2 million people or something like that. They're automatically buying into the notion that we, the people, have already bought into, which is that it's their job to make sure Americans don't die of disease, which if it's anyone's job, it wouldn't be their job. It would be Congress's job. And it's not even Congress's job because that's not in their job description either. In fact, if it's anyone's job, it's the state government's job, the state and the local government's job. Constitutionally, this is not something I'm making up. They're not kings, okay? That's the next thing I want to say. They are not kings, and yet I don't understand why this is. It seems like people are so predisposed to want a king that we are actually expecting them to act like kings, Okay, maybe a king would be responsible for the health of the entire citizenry. Maybe the king would be responsible for the health care and the pre-existing conditions of the entire citizenry. But the entire argument right now is invalid because it's an argument about a topic that Congress cannot make law about. Although it cannot constitutionally make law about health care. So the Affordable Care Act is completely unconstitutional. So why are we talking about a couple of the little aspects of the Affordable Care Act? On top of which, whose job is it to pass legislation? It sure is not the president's job. That's Congress's job. So right now, they're debating about something that they have no role in. The only role they have is that they can veto it or they can choose not to veto it. In fact, the only thing they can do is wait for Congress to write it and pass it. So they're automatically buying into this idea. They're promoting the idea that they themselves are the writers and the authors of law. No, only Congress can write law. And that's important. And Congress can only write constitutional law, right? What if instead of debating this topic about healthcare and pre-existing conditions, what if one of these candidates stopped and said, you know what? This is a moot point. This topic really has nothing to do with my job as president constitutionally. Can we move on to something more relevant? What if they said constitutionally, that's Congress's job. If you want to get Congress up here and they can debate and discuss whether or not they're going to pass unconstitutional law about taking care of healthcare, I'm more than happy to make that happen. But right now I'm the president and I would like to discuss things that actually have to do with my job. What if they did that? No, instead they're talking about things that really have nothing to do with their job. And guess what? The American people are buying into it. We're buying into it. We're like sheep. That's what we want to see. We want to see the presidents talk about things that they have nothing to do with.
Look, the governors said I did a phenomenal job. Most of them said that. In fact, people that would not be necessarily on my side said that. President Trump did a phenomenal job. We did. We got the gowns. We got the masks. We made the ventilators. You wouldn't have made ventilators. And now we're weeks away from a vaccine. We're doing therapeutics already. Fewer people are dying when they get sick. Far fewer people are dying. We've done a great job. The only thing I haven't done a good job, and that's because of the fake news. No matter what you say to them, they give you bad press on it. It's just fake news. They give you good press. They give me bad press because that's the way it is, unfortunately. But let me just tell you something. I don't care. I've gotten used to it. But I'll tell you, Joe, you could never have done the job that we did. You don't have it in your blood. You could have never done that job.
I know how to do the job. I know how to get the job
Well, you
done.
didn't do very well in swine flu. H1N1, you were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said you were a disaster.
14,000 people died, not 200,000. There was
A
no
very-
economic recession.
Sir, you made a
Far
there was
less
no
lethal
recession.
disease,
you made a
by the way.
point. Let him answer it.
And there was
Okay, so notice here he says, we shut down the economy. And you're going to notice that Biden says the same thing a couple times. He says the same thing a couple times. Okay, just to clarify, Trump did not shut down the economy. First of all, he doesn't have the power to shut down the economy. No single individual has that power. In fact, no government should have that power. That being said, we have seen unconstitutional government reaction to the coronavirus, and Trump wasn't the one who shut down the economy. The federal government did not shut down the economy. In fact, it was state governments who shut down the economy. So that's a ridiculous sort of claim on his part, and it's a ridiculous claim on Biden's part because neither of them had a role in shutting down the economy. And neither of them really have a role in how well the economy is doing. Just FYI.
If Senate Republicans, we were talking originally about the Supreme Court here, if Senate Republicans go ahead and confirm Justice Barrett, there has been talk about ending the filibuster or even packing the court, adding to the 9 justices there. You call this a distraction by the president, but in fact, it wasn't brought up by the president. It was brought up by some of your Democratic colleagues in the Congress. So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how
you gonna
strongly
pack
you
the
feel.
court?
Vote now.
gonna pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't wanna
you're a
answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the
You wanna
question
put a
is
lot of
the
new
question
Supreme
is
Court justices,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you
Who is
shut up,
on,
man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
right.
Gentlemen,
This is-
I think
So clearly, Biden got a little fed up there. Will you shut up, man? Which is a little funny. He doesn't want to answer the question because there's a stigma that exists about packing the court. Now, constitutionally, it's perfectly admissible for a president to appoint justices. So a president can't pack a court. Okay, that alone is a misnomer. That being said, Congress can change the composition of a court. So Congress can do what they can to, increase or decrease the number of Supreme Court justices on the court. That's within their ability constitutionally. So in other words, the president could pressure, push for Congress to do that if he wanted to get a certain number of judges or justices on the court that would be favorable of policy that the president would want to see pushed through Congress. But he does not want to answer the question because it is a stigma. And FDR, who was the last president who really tried to pack the court, he lost a lot of support because of trying to do so, because it does seem sort of like an unethical and sort of sketchy way of trying to get your way, trying to get policy pushed through. It's very unfortunate that the court is supposedly this important, but anyway, this really was a funny moment in the debate because President Trump really sort of pressures him and tries to get him to respond to the question, and he will not do it, and he's sort of pushed to the point where he just says, "Will you shut up, Trump?" They have a great relationship.
science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change, and what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful, clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. If you look at the Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint. And people are actually very happy about what's going on because our businesses are doing well. As far as the fires are concerned, you need forest management in addition to everything else. The forest floors are loaded up with trees, dead trees that are years old, and they're like tinder, and leaves and everything else. You drop a cigarette in there, the whole forest burns down. You've got to have forest management.
What do you
You've got to have
believe?
cuts.
What do you believe about the science?
So the entire debate about climate change is a little ridiculous because there's nowhere in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that gives Congress the ability to make law about the climate. And I know people would argue and say that, well, that was back in the day, they didn't know about climate change, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter what you think about it. It really doesn't matter what I think about it. It really doesn't matter what we feel about it. It doesn't matter what our emotions are about it. What matters is what it says. If we want to change it, we can do a constitutional amendment and go about it constitutionally. But if we violate the Constitution, we're opening the door for expansive, very arbitrary, and very dangerous government, which we already are reaping at the moment. So we don't need to be reaping it anymore. So this argument is rather moot. It's rather ridiculous. If the state governments want to do something to try to, help the climate, that's up to them. They can work through that and according to their own constitutions. But as of right now, the federal government has no part in that and has no say in that. So the fact that Trump and Biden are acting like this is a topic about which they have anything to do with is a little absurd. I wish that they would just stop and say, well, you know what? That's not constitutionally within my, job description. And that's Congress's job. And Congress can't even make laws about climate change because it doesn't fit their constitutional duties. So let's move on. Imagine if one of them said that. What would the other say? They'd have to just come out straight up and say they don't agree with the Constitution or something else, right? But no, they don't talk about that. They talk about all these issues because they're popular, because people want them, because people are demanding them, because people are acting like the government is truly the one thing to solve all of our problems when it is not, and it never should be. Never should be. So let me level with you guys here. I'm going to conclude now. This debate was pretty infuriating for me, and I wish it was more infuriating to Americans for the reasons I have stated, rather than just because Americans feel like certain topics were not important enough to the candidates, certain topics were glossed over, that one of them was a jerk, one of them was not a jerk, things like that. None of those things have anything to do with anything. In fact, most of the conversation that both of these men had everything to do with feelings and emotions and personal insults rather than their job and how well they can do it. Which is very insulting to the American public, because it's as if we only need that to make our decision about who we want to be president, when that's not in fact what we should want. The Constitution was mentioned one time. That's a problem. It's the president's job to see that the laws be faithfully executed, to uphold and defend the Constitution, and apparently neither of these candidates consider that part of their job, nor does the moderator, because you want to know why? Americans don't consider it part of their job. In fact, what they now demand for and seem to want is a king or a dictator or some sort of monarch. And I don't really know why that is, or what it is about American citizens that sort of pushes us to want some sort of powerful figure above us. But we seem to want that. And it's a very dangerous thing. So what I hope that American citizens will do is that we'll take a step back, stop getting so involved in the emotions, stop getting so involved in the sort of feelings and the anger at this and the jabs and the personal insults, and take a moment and consider, what if instead of all of that, they had actually had a real discussion about their job and the constitutionality of what they could or cannot do? What if they acted like they weren't kings? What if they acted like they were the president of the United States?